It's interesting to me the differences between people across different branches of the military and how
Mhm.
they are after like they retire from the military. Like for example, yesterday I was talking to a Navy fighter pilot, and it's interesting to me the dichotomy between the psychology of a Navy fighter pilot going to war compared to the psychology of a boots on the ground ranger on the in a firefight in Afghanistan, and how disconnected the fighter pilots are from the killing compared to the people on the ground, and how that affects them in the trajectory of their lives afterward. Um, this guy I talked to, Ryan, the fighter pilot, he was very matter of fact the way he was talking, and I know there's drone pilots that do the same thing. That's a little bit different because you're not actually flying a plane. You're sitting like at a computer, like you're playing a video game, killing people. And I know there's people that have dealt with severe PTSD from that. But it's interesting to me hearing those stories compared to like your story, right?
Mhm.
Especially when you talk about like, you witnessed a guy, you were there when a guy was squirting out of a building and you guys like took him down,
Yeah.
and it was essentially nothing to you, right? But it's so wild how that can be your experience, but a guy in Las Vegas operating a drone can be so fucked up from something like this.
It's so situational, and there could be other guys who witnessed that same event and have post-traumatic stress from it because they experienced it in a different way.
Right. That's
Right.
true.
And I don't mean that as a judgment against anyone. There were guys in that deployment who, saved their buddies' lives, injured guys, limbs getting blown apart. I mean, there's terrible stuff. And there's a lot of different ways that guys can get PTSD. But I think what you touch on there is really interesting, the way that different positions, people in different occupations in the military get different PTSD. So like one thing I would have laughed at this at one point in my life, but through talking to people, I think I have a better understanding of it. Analysts get PTSD. And the reason why it's not, but they're obviously not seeing a lot of blood and gore necessarily. They're working in a operations center, working behind a computer, but they are so firmly engrossed in their work, and they feel all this pressure on them that I have to get it right or soldiers are going to die. And their burnout rate is pretty high. I mean, they're trying to bring in all this information and distill it and analyze it and put together intelligence products. And if a bomb goes off somewhere and kills somebody, sometimes their thought is, that's my fault. Why did I miss that? And, which is bullshit. It's the fault of the guy who planted the bomb. But that's the kind of pressure that a lot of analysts put on themselves, and why they come away with PTSD from the job. The drone pilots, like you mentioned, they are sitting behind it's called like a remote control station or something like this.
Yeah.
Playing quote unquote video game. But the sensors on those drones, the video cameras, have advanced significantly, and you can zoom right in and see all the gory details. And I did an article for Connecting Vets about drone strikes in Afghanistan towards the tail end of the war, and what some of the drone pilots were going through. And I mean, they're seeing death every day. And the pilots I talked to started to have severe moral issues with the types of killings we were doing, that we were just dropping on anybody who used a radio, touched a radio. You thought you saw a tack vest under their shirt. You thought maybe you saw the barrel of a Kalashnikov under their vest. Boom. Like we were just like killing all kinds of people in Helmand province during that time frame. And they started to have serious moral injury over this. And one of the guys I talked to, he has stories like, they dropped on this man, unarmed male walking in a field, blew him up. His wife comes running out of the house and grabs his body and is crying. And she looks up into the sky and is shaking her fist.
What?
Yeah. And they watch this. They also get the grim duty of watching the bodies, pulling surveillance on the bodies after they killed them, and watching the people come and pick them up. Where do they take the body?
They're supposed to watch this.
Yeah, gather more intelligence.
The kid I talked to on this podcast that was doing that, he said that when he was doing it, he was brought in at a very, very young age. I think he wasn't even. I think he was like maybe
What
just 18.
what platform did he fly?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Some of the Army RPA pilots are quite young.
Yeah, I could probably pull it up and find out exactly what the drone that he was flying was. But I remember I want to say he wasn't even 18 when he got recruited. I don't know if that's possible or legal, but I could be wrong.
You can enlist at 17.
Okay.
And yeah, I think you can start basic training at 17, but then I'm not exactly sure what the law is offhand, but like, I don't think you can go to combat until 18. I think that's the rule.
Okay. Yeah, no. And you know, he was explaining the culture too of those people in there. Like if they have anything to say, or like they're not allowed to give any opinions on what they're doing, they're told what they're going to do. And if they show any sort of like vulnerability in this job, they're immediately outcast or called a pussy or called, you know, this guy in particular, he was saying that was very much the culture like that. Like if you showed any sort of emotion doing these like carrying out these kinds of acts, that you were basically punished for it.
Seems real tough in the moment, right? But how many of those guys now have severe PTSD themselves?
Yeah.
And are cracking up and are, you know, having a really rough go at it. You know, let's unpack those units, look at their suicide rates. And then you ask yourself the question, was this really the right way to handle personnel? You know, to ostracize people, call people pussies, like instead of, you know, trying to process what they were going through in a healthy way.
Have you ever talked to any like fighter pilots?
I have. This aviation is not like my area of expertise, but sure.
Right. Obviously.
Yeah.
What do you think? What did you deduce from talking to fighter pilots who have been deployed overseas, and like how does their experience or their view of everything differ from yours being down there, or like the culture or their day-to-day life?
I think it's a little bit different. They're a little bit removed from it. Even the helicopter pilots, it's a different perspective. It's not a bad perspective, but yeah, they do come from a different place.
They're stationed on carriers, right? In how far away are the aircraft carriers from like when they go to like carry out strikes over Afghanistan or Iraq? Like how?
I don't think we were flying off carriers except during the invasion, which was that was a very long movement for them.
And how? This might be a dumb question, but how connected are you guys? Or is there any communication between the Navy jets?
Oh, certainly. Yeah. I mean, this is the thing that Americans do very well is we do joint operations very well. So yeah, there will be like liaisons, there will be meetings, there's all kinds of coordinations. And with special ops teams on the ground, usually you have a Air Force JTAC. So an Air Force guy, Joint Terminal Attack Controller. So it's an Air Force guy who's trained specifically to talk to aircraft in the air and tell them where to drop their bombs. So it's like, that's like a very like tight relationship.
Okay.